I believe 1,000%. You're born with this. I mean, I knew coming out of Pittsburgh in a blue-collar steel mill town that you had to have the passion. It's hard to teach passion, and it's hard to teach people to have that work ethic.
Welcome to The Profitable Table, fed by Woolco Foods, the nation's first podcast devoted to the business and lifestyle of the hospitality industry. Now, here's your host, Woolco Foods CEO, Steven Toboroff.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Profitable Table, fed by Woolco Foods. I am your host, Steven Toboroff, and today I'm extremely excited for the conversation that I'm going to have because probably my favorite subject in business is sales. And today I have the opportunity to interview somebody that I have an enormous amount of respect for as a sales professional and somebody that I think you're going to really learn a lot from. So without further ado, I want to introduce my guest, which is Milt Napper. He is the Vice President of Sales and Marketing at Pico, and he's responsible for growing the brand in the United States. Milt, how are you?
Steven, doing well. It's a sunny day in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure, Milt. So why don't we do this? If you wouldn't mind, why don't we start in the following? Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got sort of involved in sales, and then sort of transition into what you're doing at Pico so that our audience gets a real nice sort of background on you?
Steve, do you have a day?
Listen, for you I do, Milt. For you I do.
Well, I tell you, and the reason I say that, Stephen, is it's unbelievable. I've been in this industry 48 years, but I started when I was 3. It goes way back. As a matter of fact, I started my career in the New Jersey area, even though I was from Pittsburgh. I went there for a little company called Sandy Fresh. We were the first people with hand care in the industry, a lot of what you see today with the Gojo, etc. I left that and went into the color world of napkins with a little company called Hofmaster, and spent 20 plus years with Hofmaster growing restaurant business with the colored napkins and ambiance, etc. I left Hofmaster in 2004. When Solo Cup bought the company, I went entrepreneurial. I helped rebuild a little company that had been around over 100-some years out of Oneida, New York, called Smith Lee. Smith Lee was then purchased by Hofmaster. So I hooked up with another company, which was out of Montreal, called Pico, and revitalized them. And guess what happened? The Hofmaster bought them. But the good news was that I was a partner in the business at the time. So we all benefited from a nice check from the Hofmaster company. The other guys retired. There was 3 Canadians that made. The other guys retired. I retired for 2 months and found out 3 things. I had no friends, I had no hobbies, and I was making my wife angry. So I started a consulting business. And the consulting business, I met a gentleman by Chris Rasmussen and Dan Schreiber at the time, and they were in the fuel business. So that's how I got here. I was not ready to quit, not ready to hang it up, and I met Chris and Dan, and they had a great little company, but they needed help in the U.S., and that's why I'm on the call with you today.
That's awesome, Milton. I can certainly relate. I haven't even tried retiring, but I know if I'm home for a couple of days, everybody gets antsy, including myself, so I can appreciate that. I want to get into Pico, but I do have a few questions that I would love to ask you first because of your background and the success that you've had. As you walked us through sort of your background, you've worked at a number of different organizations and organizations that were at different stages in their life cycle. So the first question I have is from the sales perspective, were there any challenges or any disciplines that you found were uniform or present in all of these circumstances? In other words, just any aspect of the sales process that you found yourself having to rely on in all of these organizations?
See, that's a great question. And I guess my first answer would be, and probably my number one answer, I'm a relationship guy. See, I believe that we're still in the relationship business. And if you have that personality, that entrepreneurial spirit, that drive, that commitment, and you can build relationships, Stephen, you can be successful in whatever industry you're in or whichever road you take. And again, I was fortunate enough to get two good mentors in my life because I was the kid coming out of a steel mill in Pittsburgh. Having them mentor me helped me along that way and establish the fact that, hey, the key to the success of this industry is simple. You show up a little early, you do what you say you're going to do, you stay a little late, you follow up, and you'll kill it, kid. And I've tried to apply that to every company I've worked for. So the work ethic that I learned in Pittsburgh and those two gentlemen and the relationships that I've built over my career have extended from Hoffmaster to Smith Lee to La Paco to Pico and having a relationship with guys like you.
Well, that's a very interesting answer. And I can certainly, again, identify with that because I'm also a huge believer, and I think most people that accomplish anything are in hard work. But having had the opportunity to get to know you a little bit over the years, you're an excellent communicator, and you really do something. Sales, in my mind, has so many dimensions to it, and one of it is it's really part art form. But you're an excellent communicator. When you're working in organizations and you see some newer sales reps coming up, people that are new to the business, what would you say are some of the sort of biggest aspects of sales or key components that you find that they need to work on or things that get better with time? And just to sort of even frame that a little better, Anthony Robbins, I believe it was him who said this, that great salespeople are born and then trained. And again, that's his opinion. You may or may not agree, but what are some things that you notice in newer sales reps that you find are areas where they tend to need the most training or practice in?
I believe 1,000%. You're born with this. I mean, I knew coming out of Pittsburgh in a blue-collar steel mill town that you had to have the passion. It's hard to teach passion, and it's hard to teach people to have that work ethic. And I agree 100%. You're born with it. And there are things that you can teach like knowledge and listening skills, etc. But if you don't have that passion and that drive, you're going to struggle in this industry. Now, what I see today is very disappointing to me because unfortunately, a lot of the great salespeople that I know and involved with today, unfortunately, look a lot like me. They're a little older, they're a little grayer, and our industry, Steven, as you probably know well, has trouble attracting young people because young people today are into the technology world. They're into the smartphone, the laptops, the technology. Where you and I came up, I had no problem selling toilet paper. I had no problem selling napkins. And like I told my kids, as long as you sell a lot of them. But I think what's happening today, too, is I was blessed to have those two great guys in my life, Tom Jeffries, one from Brooklyn, New York, and Frank Lund, one from Dayton, Ohio. I spent 4 years, Steven, with Tom Jeffries, learning how to do sales meetings, learning how to do seminars. And it still sticks in my head. I was 22 years old, and I was doing seminars at LaGuardia Sheridan with 400 salespeople in front of me, talking about motivation, talking about, how to handle objections. And I think today, we don't have that mentoring like we had when you and I were coming up. We don't have that teaching, the history, the background. And unfortunately, it's getting to the point where either we step up, we mentor young people, we share with them the knowledge that we gained over the years, or we're going to be in trouble from a sales standpoint. So again, I like communication. Tom Jeffries helped me with that. And so again, with young people, the mentoring needs to be stepped up.
Well, I think there's a lot of value there. And for our listeners that are, entrepreneurs, because we have listeners that are into the hospitality business, but then people that are also just into entrepreneurship. It's interesting you mentioned technology because there's a book that had a big impact on me and I've mentioned to other people, and it's called 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel, who is one of the original investors in Facebook. He's the original investors in Palantir. He's a huge tech guy. And in that book, he was partners with Elon Musk for a company that was called PayPal that they eventually sold. And what he said about Musk was that out of all of Musk's abilities, which are substantial, his greatest skill is his ability to sell. And what Peter Thiel also said in that book was, if you have a great sales process, you have a great business. So you make an excellent point, because for me, my background was somewhat different. I was a literature major in college, then went to law school, then came to Woolco. And one of the biggest mistakes that I made until about 2018 is I spent so much time focusing on process and not enough on sales. And then I became obsessed with sales and reading a lot of books about it, and managing the sales team, doing more sales on my own. And for anybody out there, you listen to Peter Thiel, Mark Cuban, sales is the key aspect of business. And the exact type of discipline, the leaning on relationships, the ability to communicate, having mentors, those are vital in any business. I mean, think of Steve Jobs, great salesman, right? Great salesman with those promotional events that he had. So that's an excellent point.
Hey, Steven, let me interrupt you. Always remember, and I know you know this, nothing happens until something's sold.
You're absolutely right.
So that was been a driving point. And now I do have relatives that are accountants and CPAs, and they get a little aggravated by that comment. and I shouldn't use the reference of a bean counter, but at the end of the day, nothing happens until you sell something. So.
No, you're so right. And I think that's why Peter Thiel took so much time to emphasize that, because there is a misconception. We all come into contact with companies that are simply technology-based. And there was a misconception that Thiel wanted to address, which is, look, even if you have a killer app, or you think you do, or you have this transformative technology, without somebody selling it, without raising awareness in the marketplace, without making it a compelling value proposition, it's like you said, you don't have anything. It's really fascinating, and I want to go deeper into it, but I want to tie it in a little bit more into, can you tell us a little bit more? Because, it's funny, Milt, I don't know if you remember this, but the last time we had the opportunity to speak together, it was right in the heart of the challenges of COVID, and you guys had pivoted to doing soap. But what I'll never forget about that Zoom conversation you had, because we were in it as well, is even in the midst of that process, which was challenging and somewhat disorienting, you were on point, selling, communicating, giving clarity. And I have some other thoughts on that whole thing, which we'll get into later. But tell us a little bit more about Pico, what they do, where they're positioned in the North American market. And I want to go into that a little bit deeper.
Well, again, it seems like a long time ago, but it's really not. I mean, we went to ground zero, and pivot became the word of 2020. The business and industry had to pivot or die. We were fortunate enough to, like you said, come out with a hand sanitizer. So our business, just so you know, and it's relatable, because the food service industry suffered. Restaurants were closing. Catering was non-existent. So Pico was actually started out in 1991 out of Toronto. Name was Leolite. And it was owned by Daniel Schreiber, who basically, I don't want to say imitated, but duplicated the Sterno brand type operation or company. So his father and he actually worked for Sterno, and then they were let go. So he went out there, and you never want to have someone mad at you. If you fire them, and they have a tendency to come back after you. So the company was Leolite, and Daniel was the main person there. This is 1991, actually. Daniel was great with street business, but he really didn't understand the distribution business. He was more of an end user person, calling on the end user. So his business was onesies and twosies. I think it was around 2014. He met a guy named Chris Rasmussen, and Chris was in the distribution business with his father. He owned the electrical. So Chris came on board really to help Daniel get into the distribution side of the business. And then in 2016, I entered Leolite because of my background of, I hate to say it again, of 40-some years in the industry, to help them to build the brand. My job was to come in build a brand. We had zero sales in the U.S. We had zero salespeople, had zero brokers. So since I left the market leader back in 2004, I've always loved to have a challenge. And that gets me going, wakes me up every day, going after and building something. So I was excited to join Pico in 2016 as a consultant, and then I ended up being a full-time. So Leolite changed its name when Chris took over to Pico Hospitality. And Chris wanted the company to be more than just a fuel company. The identification of our product line was, well, you're in the chafing fuel business. Well, today we're more than that. And changing the name helped to steer people with the realization that, hey, we're a 3-brand company. We have a Leolite brand, which is our fuel company. We have a Vita Casa brand, which is a chick butt technology in food warming. And we have an Honor brand, which was a result, as you mentioned before, Steve, of the pandemic. We came out with a revolutionary new product called Easy Snap that's really cool and neat and different. And we'd be happy to get your customer samples, et cetera. So we're Pico with 3 brands underneath. The Leolite being the fuel business, Vita Casa being the flameless, high-end technology battery business, and the Honor being the hand sanitizer, which again, I could give hand sanitizer away today, but we're more than that. The Honor system is a hospitality, amenities, products, shampoos, et cetera. So very diversified. And that was one of the things we learned from the pandemic, that we just couldn't be one core industry. We had to be diversified. We had to get into other operations, because going to ground zero, Pico never wanted to go there again. So
no, totally. And that's a great sort of education, and I thank you for that. You know, what I'm seeing in the New York market, and would love to get your opinion because you have visibility across the country, is not only has the hospitality business come back in a big way, but events. So, for example, earlier it was last year even, it's amazing how time flies, I interviewed one of my guests was Paul Gallen, who's a head of Pier 60, and was talking about how things had come roaring back there. And I know from my own business and customers that I have that are caterers or event spaces, these places are getting booked out 9, 10, 11 months in advance. So it seems to me to be an extraordinarily strong segment of the hospitality sector in general. Are you seeing that on your end nationwide, that people have really come back and using, because as you said before, a lot of your product, at least from the sort of votive candle side of the business, is towards, catering and parties and stuff like that.
Restaurants, yep, fine dining, white tablecloth.
I mean, are you seeing the same thing, or what are you seeing, Milton?
Well, again, 2020 we were ground zero. 2021 we sold, actually, Stephen, we sold more hand sanitizer in 2 weeks than we sold fuel in a year. So that saved the business. But 22, it started coming back. 23, we had our best year in the history of Pico in 2023. We knocked it out of the park. And how we knocked it out of the park were just exactly what you said. The business was coming back. Planners were booking events. Banquet halls were opening up. The restaurants were fully opening, et cetera. So, yeah, we rebounded very nicely. And so our business today is on track to probably do another 30% increase over 2023 position. And quite frankly, look, we always like to pat ourselves on the back. But if it weren't for guys like you and companies like Woolco, and Pico has built their business, just so you know, we built our business on the entrepreneurial guys like yourself, okay? The independent entrepreneurial distributors. We haven't built our business on the big guys. So again, that's a kudos to you for helping us set the records that we're setting today.
No, I appreciate that, Milt. So I want to go back to sort of the sales issue, because now that I have you here, I want to share with you some of the things that I'm doing with my sales team. And I would really love to know your response, and I love to learn. So please don't hesitate to disagree or refine or augment anything I'm saying. But when I speak to my sales team, there's a few things I emphasize with them, and I'm just going to mention two and would love your thoughts. The first is I say that it is their responsibility to be focusing on, one, bringing value to their customer or the prospect. When you're taking up somebody's time, whether it's an existing customer or somebody that you'd like to onboard, their time is valuable. They're not interested in wasting it. And therefore, it's incumbent upon us to identify, if we can, by being great listeners, where we can bring value to them. Because if we can't bring value, then what are we doing? Then it's really not a good fit. That's one. And then the second thing is I tell my guys, because one of the cliches, although I have to say it's becoming less and less prevalent in sales, I think that the whole sort of sales industry is gaining greater and greater respect, which it deserves. And I think it now has achieved that level. But what I always tell my guys is the following. Never say anything that you're not 100% ready to back up. Because there's an old saying, words that come from the heart enter the heart. And we've all had the experience of dealing with a nervous sales rep or somebody that's trying to get us to buy something. And you can tell that they're saying anything just to get us in the door. And I think they put those people in a horrible position. I tell my guys, as I just said, you've got to be authentic. You've got to be 100% truthful, because if you are, it's going to give you the confidence to sell. And a big part of sales is the transference of confidence. So what do you think about those 2 points right off the bat?
Well, I don't know how anyone could argue with that, Steven. I mean, look, I survived in this business as long as I have, not because I lied to people or told them what they wanted to hear. My job was never to tell people what they wanted to hear. It was to tell them, the truth, be upfront. If I didn't know, oh, by the way, I'll get back to you. I don't have that answer. And again, salespeople sometimes think they have to have all the answers to the test. Yeah, you don't. A definition of a salesperson to me is know where to find the information. But at that time, you let that customer know, look, I don't have that answer for you, but I'll get it for you. Here's where the misconnect is. You know what happens? Most salespeople, when they say, well, I'll get that to you, you know what happens, Steven? They don't get back to the customer. That's what I see today. Salespeople, the customer asks them for some information. Something's brought up. They've been asked to follow up, and they don't. Salespeople make one call a day today, and if they're told a negative or something, a lot of times they don't go back. So that's the challenge. But again, there's nothing embarrassing about saying, I don't know. People will respect you a lot more when you say, I'll get back to you, and you do. It's like I told my daughter. My daughter's in this business. Amanda, all you have to do what you say you're going to do. Follow up, follow up, follow up. You'll be a superstar. And that's what she does. And she is. As far as value, you don't want to be a Me Too left salesperson. And you all know what Me Too is. It's a race to zero. I've always sold value added products because I wanted to bring value to my customers. I wanted to bring solutions to my customers. Okay. I didn't want to walk in and say, open up my notebook or open up today. We do our laptops and, someone gives me an order and I leave. So again, you always want to sell the value proposition versus the Me Too, because Steven, I beat the price today, but guess what my competitor does tomorrow? They beat my price. Okay. So you're only good as your lowest price. You sell value. It gives the reason for that buyer to buy your product. It eliminates what I call, remember the phrase we used to use back in the day, buyer's remorse. Okay. One of the things that I love asking a customer today to eliminate buyer's remorse is, Steven, let me ask you a question. What impressed you most about what I've shown you here today? So if Steven tells me, well, I like the innovation, I like the safety features, I like this. Now, if someone asks Steven, why did you buy that from Milt? What do you think he's going to say? Well, I like the safety, I like this, I like that. If you don't do that, if someone questions that buying decision and they don't have any good answer, chances are you may lose that sale. So I love asking that question. What impressed you most about what I've shown you here today? It really cements, as I used to say, cements the sale. You don't want to be a visitor either. I worked for distribution back in the 70s, actually in New Jersey. And my job, as far as I was concerned, wasn't always just to open up new business. It was to penetrate customers. So if I walked into a restaurant and I saw that they had Sexton Rykoff back in the day on the shelf, I wanted that to be the Woolco brand. I wanted that to be the Woolco product. So I penetrated my customers. My mantra was, if we had it, my customers should buy it. And I penetrated that customer. And I don't think that's being done today. A lot of times salespeople are afraid to rock the boat. And I try to impress upon them, if you don't rock the boat, your competitors will, because they want to, they don't want to offend the customer. They don't want to upset the apple cart. And I impress upon them, if you don't, someone else will. Did I answer your question?
You answered it beautifully. In fact, you answered it so well that the next time you're in this region, I'm going to have all of my salespeople assembled. And if you don't mind, I'm going to ask you to give them sort of a highlight of what we're doing here, because just sort of responding to what you said, when I'm working with the sales team or when I'm speaking to my sales manager, the first thing you said, because I was listening very closely to you, is the follow-through. Without follow-through, there's nothing. And you're 100% right. And I think a lot of times in sales, people need to understand that it's not personal, that our prospect is not just sitting around waiting for us to show up on her or his door and give us their time. Whereas they actually would need what we're selling, would like it, but we just have to come back. So the follow-through is essential. The other thing you said, which is really true, is a lot of times when we take business from a competitor, we almost never, we're very competitive on price, and you have to be, but we almost never capture new business based on price. It's always based on some pain point that our prospect has that we can address, whether the driver shows up not at the desirable time, whether the sales rep does not call them back, that's a big problem, whether the quality of something isn't right. So when you talk about being somebody that gets back to a customer, that is so, so important. Nothing conveys that you're not going to care about their business than not getting back to them.
Absolutely.
And then the final thing, which I'm so happy you brought up, because it's one of the great opportunities in my business and something I speak about, because we have over 10,000 items, right? And I always say to my customers, my sales team and the sales manager, I say, we owe it to our customers to give them information on the items they're not buying from us. And the reason I phrase it like that, Milt, is the following. If our customers are showing us loyalty and they're buying from us, and let's say they're not buying produce or dairy, we need to show them what our price offerings are, what our quality offerings are, because for all we know, they may not be getting treated properly. And whether they buy from us or not, let's say, you know what, Steve, I'm sorry, you gave me great pricing, but the guy who I'm buying my dairy and produce from is my wife's brother and I can never switch. And you know what I'd say to that person? I'm just happy that your business is better because of it, because you've already been a phenomenal partner. So
let me jump on that a quick second, because what I've tried to do too is, you're right. Look, we all sell with people that we have relationships. It's going well. There's no issue. And what I've done over my career, Steven, is said, look, that's super. I have the same type of customers. I have the same type of people that I deal business with who are doing well like you. However, look at me as a backup. Look at me as an option. So God forbid something goes wrong with your friend or your brother-in-law's business. Yeah, I'm here for you. Okay. So I always like to throw that out too, to say, hey, I'll be there for you. I'm not looking for an order today, but if you ever need me, I'll be around.
It's a great approach. Again, so much of sales is really just being an authentic, hardworking, clear communicating individual, because people see through the BS today. Who wants to go around and doing that anyway? You don't need to. I feel bad for the sales reps that work for horrible companies or services where they have to. So let me ask you this question, Milt, because it's a challenge that I deal with from time to time. My sales manager deals with from time to time. Would love to get your insight into it. Maybe you can help me out. How would you approach, in any sales team, like any professional baseball team, you're going to have guys on the roster that are Aaron Judge and Juan Soto that are just phenomenal players. Not everybody's a 400 hitter working at 62 home runs. But what do you think is the best way to approach, if you have reps on your team that are selling the same service into the same market with the same challenges, and they're substantially underperforming their peers? How do you address that? Or what would be some suggestions you would give to sort of try to get those reps up to par or identify what the problem is? How would you approach that?
Obviously you got to find out why aren't they? I mean, you can't solve something if you don't know why it's happening. So from a sales manager, I'm gonna have a list of questions to see why aren't they being successful. It can be as simple, Steven, as saying, "Are you asking for the order?" "Oh, no, I'm not. I was afraid to." "Okay, well, You can't be afraid to get a no, but you should have a series of questions as a sales manager that you can help that person who's not performing as well as your stars. The other thing too, that again, it gets to the mentoring. If you have a person that is struggling, but you like them, they seem like a little diamond in the rough, but they're not killing it yet. Why not have them being mentored by your top sellers? Have them take a day with them, see how that top seller performs in the marketplace. As opposed to trying to think up a solution. Have them learn from the guys and gals who are killing it. And you'll be amazed that they'll pick up things from that will help them become more successful. So again, you got to uncover why aren't they being successful, and it could be as simple as they're not asking for the darn order. But again, I keep going back to this. I'm a big mentor guy. If it wasn't for that, I'd still be in the steel mill in Pittsburgh.
I think you're right about mentors. Something that I've talked about in earlier podcasts, but would love to get your thoughts on is the following. Much like my business and many businesses, restaurants, because again, our key audience are people in the hospitality industry, although we have entrepreneurs and people that are interested in business in general. But to bring it back to restaurants for a moment, restaurants have enormous opportunities to upsell their existing customers when they come into their establishment. So what I mean by that is the following. A lot of restaurants utilize social media, which is a great tool, and other sort of technological devices to promote their business. But what would you say are some suggestions that you might offer? Let's say I'm a regular that goes to a restaurant, or you could pick any scenario you want, or I'm somebody who's not a regular and I go to a restaurant with my wife or some friends and I have a good evening. What are some strategies or some approaches that might work for a restaurant to upsell that type of customer in one of a number of ways?
Yeah. Well, a big part of that is, you think about it, the salesperson is really the waiter or waitress, right?
100%.
They're the salespeople. So again, a lot of restaurants see those people as order takers. Okay. Kind of relates to our business, right? Order takers versus sellers. So if I run Milt's restaurant, I guarantee you my waiters and waitresses would be fully trained on some people skills, on upselling. Oh, by the way, Steven, have you tried our special custard pie lately? No, I haven't, Steven. Well, you know what? You really need to. Or have you tried the specialty drink? You have to create those waiters and waitresses. You have to put them into the selling mode. And again, the top management provides the training, provides the expertise. If I had to, I'd send the waiters and waitresses to a selling course or sales 101. That's the way you upsell, is by selling. And we don't, instead of looking at waiters and waitresses as order takers, let's look at them as salespeople.
I think it's a great suggestion, and I think it serves two purposes at the same time. The first is exactly what you said, and you couldn't be more right. And in fact, for those people out there listening, I would give very serious thought to the notion, because this is the first time anyone said this, and I think it's a phenomenal idea, of having basic sales training and then maybe move to advanced for your serving staff and your bartenders, mixologists. But the other thing is as we have, again, back to technology. Technology can be a phenomenal tool, but technology does not satisfy some fundamental needs that we have as humans. And one of those needs is human-to-human interaction. And so if you're going to have somebody interacting with your customers, whether it's in the restaurant business or any other, it only pays to have them trained so that they can maximize that relationship. And again, always lead with value. Hey, you know what? I see you're finished. I just spoke to my manager over here. Next time you come in, the custard pie is on us. Because again, the value of bringing that person in. So that's a phenomenal suggestion. Milt, you are just talking to you, and I know that the audience is going to hear this. I am refreshed of this whenever I speak to you. You're such a phenomenal communicator. Was that something that you learned from your mentors, or were you always a really great communicator, or is that something that you developed over time by just consciously trying to get better at it?
Well, I guess it goes back to I came from an inner city neighborhood. My dad died when I was 8 years old. My mother was a stay-at-home mom, and she had to go clean houses for a living. So we were poor. We just didn't have the means that most people. And the neighborhood I grew up in, I knew one thing: I was going to get out of that neighborhood and do something good. And what I saw at an early age was I was good at communicating. I was good at, I had a good mouthpiece. I mean, I got thrown out of Penn State in 1972 because I didn't know you had to go to class, because I was too busy working the room, working the crowd at the student union. So I knew at an early age that I could communicate. And I noticed these guys at some point, riding around in nice cars and nice suits. And everyone I asked, I said, what do you do? They said, well, we're in sales. I said, well, son of a gun. I kind of think I like that. I like the suits. I like the cars. And I think I could do that. So I had the desire. I had the want to. I just need to be, I needed to be polished. And the guys like Frank Lund and Tom Jeffries helped me get polished and helped me. And it didn't come easily. I mean, I'll never forget Jack Hunter, who was the owner of Sandy Fresh. He said, Milt, son of a gun, you have no vices, do you? And Steven, coming from the inner city, I didn't know what vices was. So I had a great desire to learn. I had a great desire to be a sponge. I had a great desire to dedicate my time and energy to get better and outperform the guys with the MBAs or the law degrees, okay? So I had a great passion and desire to do that. So that's how I got here. It's worked well. And, I don't know if my wife would agree with that because she says I never shut up sometimes. But yeah, hey, that's where it is.
Well, I could talk to you all day, Milt, but I would say that, you mentioned something as I'm listening to you. You have, and this is another big part of sales, and so I am going to say what I would like, but I'm going to bring it into a question because I'd love to get your thoughts on this. One of the things I try to talk to the sales team about, as well as the manager, and I do this for myself, is there's so much value and so much importance in having a positive, energetic mindset. You just talked in the answer to the last question you gave me about how you were hungry to learn, hungry to get better. All of the things that you were describing are an inner drive. I did a podcast a few episodes back where I identified 7 key attributes of human behavior that have absolutely nothing to do with the outside world and everything to do with decisions that we can make for ourselves, such as being teachable. So my question to you, Milt, is what would you suggest people in sales or any aspect of business do to try to get in the habit, or what steps could they take of any kind to begin to cultivate that type of mindset that you have? I mean, I know some of it comes from your background and you're born with it, but is there anything you could suggest for people to do?
Well, it's funny. Early on, I used to rent these tapes, motivational tapes. I used to rent selling tapes. Back then, you had the car cassette. So you put the cassette on and we were, driving down the highway. So I would tell people, if you want to get better, okay, attend a seminar, attend classes. If you're struggling with communication, I always used to recommend Toastmasters. I thought that was great for people that were struggling talking to people. I thought that was a great thing. But it's all about educating yourself. But you have to have that 1, 2. And I did it by listening to tapes, motivational speeches, and selling skills. How to become a better salesperson. So today the cassettes aren't there, but you got online. I mean, have your sales team or have your salesperson that wants to get better. And again, you have to have that desire. Listen to those people who are successful. You reference a few people that you look up to and look at and say, God, that's a really good human being. It is very successful. So again, it goes back to the 1, 2, and by, educating yourself.
Milt, this has really been a delight for me because I love sales and you're a master. And so for people that are listening, this is, I think, an episode that has so much in it. you may want to listen to it again.
Okay.
Make no mistake about it. As you said, nothing happens until somebody sells something, and no company scales. As Peter Thiel said, if you have a great sales process, you have a great business. And a key component of a great sales process are people that are demonstrating the exact attributes that you've shared with me in this interview. So I really thank you, Milt, for taking the time to do this. This has been an absolute pleasure. Let me ask you, just give us some information. If people want to get in touch with you to ask a question, or people want to learn more about Pico, how would they get in touch with you?
Well, we have picohospitality.com. That's PICO hospitality.com, www.picohospitality.com. That's probably the easiest way. You can reach out to my email, which is Milt, M-I-L-T, at picohospitality.com. Or you can do old school. Pick up the phone and call me, 412-298-1408. 412-298-1408. So I'd like to leave you with one thing, though, Steven, and it came to mind as we were wrapping up here. One of the things that you might want to share as we close this out is a question that I really embraced over my career, and that is to ask a customer, if you could change one thing about your current supplier, what would that be? That will provide your salesperson with tremendous insight. Well, my supplier doesn't show up all the time. My supplier always, doesn't have what I need. So if you could change one thing with your current supplier, and that diffuses it, you're not trying to sell them anything. You're basically wanting to be a consultant and show that you're concerned about their business. So I'm going to leave you on that last note. Okay?
Milt, I really appreciate it. It's a great tip, and I personally have learned a lot. And as important as learning, I've really enjoyed this conversation. I have a great infusion of energy. So, Milt, thank you so much for your time, and have an awesome, awesome day, all right?
Thanks a lot, Steven. Have a good one.
You got it.
Thank you for listening to The Profitable Table, fed